Okay, well, thank you for coming. I mean, poetry is becoming a thing, so, we're all here enjoying it. Poets, like the rest of us, get old and complain about it and have thoughts about it. The only thing is they write it down in very elegant style, so we get to read it later. So I'm going to read you a series of some poems where the poets are talking about aging. They're all over the place with their attitudes. I thought just for the fun of it, we would start with the really, really bottom. I mean, the person who feels the very worst about being old, and work our way up from there, so we'll go out on a high note. Okay, here's what I think is one of the worst that I have ever come across. It was written in the 5th century BCE by Sophocles. It's a part of a series of plays about Oedipus. This is Oedipus at Colonus. Now, you know about Oedipus. He's the guy that killed his father, married his mother. The poor guy had a really rotten life the whole time he lived, though. It wasn't just that one thing. It was everything. So here he is at the end of his life, writing about what he thinks about being old in life. Show me a man who longs to live a day beyond his time, who turns his back on a decent length of life. I'll show the world a man who clings to folly. For the long looming days lay up 1,000 things closer to pain than pleasure, and the pleasure disappears, you look and know not where. When a man's outlived his limit, plunged in age, and the good comrade comes who comes at last to all, not with a wedding ring song, no lyre, no singers dancing, the doom of the death god comes like lightning, always death at the last. Not to be born is best, when all is reckoned in. But once a man has seen the light, the next best thing by far is to go back where he came as quickly as he can. For once his youth slips by, light on the wing, light-headed, what mortal blows can he escape when griefs won't stalk his days? Envy and enemies, rage and battles, bloodshed, and last of all, despised old age overtakes him, stripped of power, companions, stripped of love, the worst this life of pain can offer, old age, our mate at last. Now that's miserable. Yeah. Not to be born is best, he says. And then Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote a lot about age. I mean, of course, King Lear, the old Falstaff. He's not thrilled with it. On the other hand, he has a slightly more nuanced view of it. And this is one of his sonnets. That's quite a famous one where he's talking about what old age is like for him. He lived into his 50s, which in his time was old. This is Sonnet 73. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs where shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all the rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. He sounds good even when he's unhappy. A couple of short poems by Robert Frost. Now, I always wonder why Robert Frost disliked age so much. I mean, the older he got, the more famous he got. He was on tour when he was in his 80s. He was the great American poet. Everybody knew his name. If you ask any American in the early 20th century to name a poet, he was the one they could have named. And yet, here's two short poems. One, he's fairly cynical about old age. And you don't often see Robert Frost cynical. You think of him as, the great lover of the North Woods. But in this one, he's quite cynical. And then the second one, he's sort of asking a puzzled question about, age. So here's the cynical one. It's called Provide, Provide. The witch that came, the withered hag, to wash the steps with pail and rag, was once the beauty Abishag, the picture pride of Hollywood. Too many fall from great and good for you to doubt the likelihood. Die early and avoid the fate, or if predestined to die late, make up your mind to die in state. Make the whole stock exchange your own. If need be, occupy a throne where nobody can call you crone. Some have relied on what they knew, others on being simply true. What worked for them might work for you. No memory of having starred atones for later disregard or keeps the end from being hard. Better to go down dignified with boughten friendship at your side than none at all. Provide, provide. Is that like living in a CCRC? No. Sorry. Now this one is a more serious poem, and he asks, the last line of this poem is always kind of one that echoes with you when you're thinking about old age, and you have to answer that question for yourself, I think. It's called the oven bird. Now that's a name of a real bird in New England. It's not anything metaphorical about the name of it. The Oven Bird by Robert Frost. There is a singer everyone has heard, loud, a midsummer and a midwood bird, who makes the solid tree trunks sound again. He says that leaves are old, and that for flowers, midsummer is to spring as 1 to 10. He says the early petal fall is past, when pear and cherry bloom went down in showers on sunny days, a moment overcast. Then comes that other fall we name the fall. He says the highway dust is over all. The bird would cease and be as other birds, but that he knows in singing not to sing. The question that he frames in all but words is what to make of a diminished thing. Now there are a lot of old age poems, and there's some that probably you've heard that I chose not to read because they are fairly well known. I suspect you know the one. Everybody's at least heard the lines from the Dylan Thomas one about, do not go gentle into that good night, rage, rage against the dying of the light. That's he wrote that about his father dying, not about himself, but it was about, don't go gentle, don't die easy. Sort of in my last bunch of really sad ones, I'm not going to read you the whole poem because it's quite a long poem. I'm just going to read you one little snippet of it. But to me, it's one of the saddest because it's a more sophisticated poem. It's a poem called The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Yeah, it's by T.S. Eliot. And you can just imagine when you think of the words love song and J. Alfred Prufrock, you're going to have an odd point of view, because what kind of love song would somebody named J. Alfred Prufrock sing? Well, basically, he's spending a lot of the poem talking about, he's old now and he's thinking back, and he's thinking about the shallowness of his life and all the things that he didn't do. At one point, he thinks he's just sort of, he says, he admits it, he's a mediocre person. He says, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. I'm an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two, obsequious, glad to be of use. He doesn't think very highly of himself. But at the end, he's thinking back over chances that he has not taken. They always say, you regret what you didn't do, not what you did. And that's what he's regretting, what he didn't do. And at the end, this is the part that these 6 lines. He says, I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I will wear flight flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I hear the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. Now, that's sad. But I said it's a much more ambiguous poem because he's not a lovable character. He's really not. But he's suffering. And then you get into these more modern poems now, and you get poets who are more ambiguous about things. They recognize the problems that we all have with old age, but it's a nuanced kind of thing for them. This is one called Words by Grace Paley. What has happened? Language eludes me. The nice specifying words of my life fail when I call. Ah, says a friend, dried up, no doubt, on the desiccated twigs in the swamp of the skull, like a lake where the water level has been shifted by highways a couple of miles off. Another friend says, no, my dear, perhaps you were only meant to speak more plainly. And here's one by Donald Hall, who just died, I guess, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. He was a poet laureate, really dozens and dozens of volumes, a very well-known poet. He did not have a terribly happy life. His wife died, fairly young. But anyway, this is his poem called Affirmation, and you can decide if you think it's an affirmation or not. To grow old is to lose everything. Aging, everybody knows it. Even when we are young, we glimpse it sometimes and nod our heads when a grandfather dies. Then we row on for years in the midsummer pond, ignorant and content. But a marriage that began without harm scatters into debris on the shore, and a friend from school drops cold on a rocky strand. If a new love carries us past midlife, middle age, our wife will die at her strongest and most beautiful. New women may come and go, all go. The pretty lover who announces that she is temporary is temporary. The bold woman, middle-aged against our old age, sinks under an anxiety she cannot withstand. Another friend of decades estranges himself in words that pollute 30 years. Let us stifle under mud at the pond's edge and affirm that it is fitting and delicious to lose everything. Well, he says it's an affirmation. Yes, you can. How about this one? Billy Collins. Billy Collins is still alive. I think he's still teaching writing, maybe one course a year. He's at Lehman College in New York. I think he's the best living American poet right now, in my opinion. He's got a certain wit and a certain charm that even when he's not terribly happy, you just can't ignore his style. This one is called Forgetfulness. The name of the author is the first to go, followed obediently by the title, the plot, the heartbreaking conclusion, the entire novel, which suddenly becomes one you have never read or even heard of. As if, one by one, the memories you used to harbor decided to retire to the southern hemisphere of the brain, to a little fishing village where there are no phones. Long ago, you kissed the names of the 9 muses goodbye and watched the quadratic equation pack its bag. And even now, as you memorize the order of the planets, something else is slipping away. A state flower, perhaps, the address of an uncle, the capital of Paraguay. Whatever it is you are struggling to remember, it is not poised on the tip of your tongue, not even lurking in some obscure corner of your spleen. It has floated away down a dark mythological river whose name begins with an L as far as you can recall, well on your way to oblivion, where you will join those who have even forgotten how to swim or how to ride a bicycle. No wonder you rise in the middle of the night to look up the date of a famous battle in a book on war. No wonder the moon in the window seems to have drifted out of a love poem you used to know by heart. These are grimmer, aren't they? I thought they were more nuanced. And I guess they're better than Oedipus anyway, saying not to be born is best of all. They're better than that. You're not looking happy out there. But isn't it nice that somebody can express things you're feeling so beautifully? Okay, this is a poem by a guy named Stanley Kunitz called Touch Me. Summer is late, my heart. Words plucked out of the air some 40 years ago when I was wild with love and torn almost in two, scatter like leaves this night of whistling wind and rain. It is my heart that's late. It is my song that's flown. Outdoors all this afternoon under a gunmetal sky, staking my garden down, I kneel to the crickets trilling underfoot as if about to burst from their crusty shells. And like a child again, I marvel to hear so clear and brave a music pour from such a small machine. What makes their engine go? Desire, desire, desire. The longing for the dance stirs in the buried life. One season only, and it's done. So let the battered old willow crash against the window panes and the house timbers creak. Darling, do you remember the one you married? Touch me and remind me who I am. Okay, here's one called In View of the Fact by A.R. Ammons. He died maybe 15 years ago. A.R. Ammons is actually a poet from North Carolina who became famous. He was born in Whiteville, North Carolina, or as the people there say, Whiteville, and became quite famous nationally. So we do have some well-known poets. Okay, this is called In View of the Fact. And it's really kind of one long sentence, but I'll try to. The people of my time are passing away. My wife is baking for a funeral, a 60-year-old who died suddenly. When the phone rings, and it's Ruth we care so much about in intensive care. It was once weddings that came so thick and fast, and then first babies, such a hullabaloo. Now it's this, that, and the other, and somebody else gone or on the brink. Well, we never thought we would live forever, although we did, and now it looks like we won't. Some of us are losing a leg to diabetes, some don't know what they went downstairs for, some know that a hired watchful person is around, some like to touch the cane tip into something steady, so nice. We have already lost so many, brushed the loss of ourselves. Our address books, for so long a slow scrabble, now are palimpsests, scribbles, and scratches. Our index cards for Christmases, birthdays, Halloweens drop clean away into sympathies. At the same time, we are getting used to so many leavings, we are hanging on with a grip to the ones left. We are not giving up on the congestive heart failures or the brain tumors, on the nice old men left in empty houses, or on the widows who decide to travel a lot. We think the sun may shine someday when we'll drink wine together and think of what we used to be. Until we die, we will remember every single thing, recall every word, love every loss. Then we will, as we must, leave it to others to love, love that can go brighter and deeper till the very end, gaining strength and getting more precious all the way. Okay. As I said, Shakespeare, of course, did King Lear, and King Lear is one of your classic stories on old people making wrong decisions, thinking they know better than anybody else, coming to terms with what their life's work has caused to happen, so to speak, and having to deal with the after effects of it. That's a shorthand. It's a lot more than that, but that is part of it. And this is a poem by David Wright called Lines on Retirement After Reading King Lear. Avoid storms and retirement parties. You can't trust the sweetness your friends will offer when they really want your office, which they'll redecorate. Beware the still untested pension plan. Keep your keys. Ask for more troops than you think you'll need. Listen more to fools and less to colleagues. Love your youngest child the most, regardless. Back to storms. Dress warm, take a friend, don't eat the grass, don't stand near tall trees, and keep the yelling down. The winds won't listen, and no one will see you in the dark anyway. It's too hard to hear you over all the thunder. But you're not Lear, except that we can't stop you from what you've planned to do. In the end, no one leaves the stage in character. We never see the feather or the mirror held to our lips. So don't wait for skies to crack with sun. Feel the storm's sweet sting invade you to the skin, the strange, sore comforts of the wind. Embrace your children's ragged praise and that of friends. Go ahead, take it off, take it all off. Run naked into tempests. Weave flowers into your hair. Bellow at cataracts. If you dare, scream at the gods. Babble as if you thought words could save. Drink rain like the cold beer. So much better than making theories. We'd all come with you laughing if we could. Okay. Checking out the time, keeping an eye on the time here. One of the things that being a poet has the advantage of is you can write down some of the conflicts that you're having and make it sound good. Now, William Butler Yeats lived to be fairly old also, but he particularly hated being old. In one poem, he talks about that his mind, and I identify with this one, that his mind feels okay like it did 20, 30 years ago. It still feels good. It still feels active. But old age, he said, his body, it's like a tin can tied to a dog's tail. Drags it around with him everywhere and can't shake it. So, but he does the sort of classic poet thing here, thinking, life is wonderful, it's full of movement and activity and sex and love and excitement, but damn it, things change and you get old and die. And then there's the world of immortality, which is perfect and unchanging and golden, but it's so boring and nothing ever stops, nothing ever changes and becomes different. So in this poem, he's talking about, being tired of one world, going to the other, and then finding it's not what it's cracked up to be either. And it's a very famous poem. It's a difficult poem in some ways, but it's just so beautiful. It's called Sailing to Byzantium. That is no country for old men. The young in one another's arms, birds in the trees, those dying generations, at their song, the salmon falls, the mackerel crowded seas, fish, flesh, or fowl commend all summer long whatever is begotten, born, and dies. Caught in that sensual music, all neglect monuments of unaging intellect. An aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul clap its hands and sing, and louder sing for every tatter in its mortal dress. Nor is there singing school but studying monuments of its own magnificence. And therefore I have sailed the seas and come to the holy city of Byzantium. O stages standing in God's holy fire, as in the gold mosaic of a wall, come from the holy fire, burn in a gyre, and be the singing masters of my soul. Consume my heart away, sick with desire and fastened to a dying animal, it knows not what it is, and gather me into the artifice of eternity. Once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make, of hammered gold and gold enameling, to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or set upon a golden bough to sing to lords and ladies of Byzantium of what is past, or passing, or to come. Well, life, immortality, you can't win either way. And then just a couple that I think really are, doggone it, affirmation type poems. One by Lucille Clifton called There is a Girl Inside. Lucille Clifton is a contemporary African-American poet. There is a girl inside. She is randy as a wolf. She will not walk away and leave these bones to an old woman. She is a green tree in a forest of kindling. She is a green girl in a used poet. She has waited patient as a nun for the second coming, when she can break through gray hairs into blossom. And her lovers will harvest honey and thyme, and the woods will be wild with the damn wonder of it. Yes. And then, I like this. This is an affirmation. This is a 12th century Chinese poem by a guy named Liu Yu. He's happy about this. An old man pushing 70, in truth, he acts like a little boy, whooping with delight when he spies some mountain fruits, laughing with joy, tagging after the village mummers, with the others having fun stacking tiles to make a pagoda, standing alone, staring at his image in the jardiniere pool, tucked under his arm a battered book to read, just like the first time he set out for school. So if it's your second childhood, you might as well have the same fun you had in the first. And then this one is one you probably know, but it's you've heard the first line, I'm sure, so you might as well hear the rest of it because it's wonderful. It's called When I Am Old by a British writer named Fleur Adcock. When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple, with a red hat which doesn't go and doesn't suit me. And I shall spend my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals and say, we've no money left for butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I'm tired and gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bills and run my stick along the public railings to make up for the sobriety of my youth. I shall go out in my slippers in the rain and pick flowers in other people's gardens and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shirts and grow more fat and eat 3 pounds of sausage at a go, or only bread and pickle for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things in boxes. But now we must have clothes that keep us dry and pay our rent and not swear in the street and set a good example for the children. We must have friends to dinner and read the papers. So maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not too shocked and surprised when suddenly I am old and start to wear purple. And then I promised you a good ending. So this is a poem. Again, I'm not going to read you the whole poem because it's a very long poem. It's a great poem, but it is quite long. It's called Intimations of Immortality by William Wordsworth. And, of course, Wordsworth was your typical, I can't say he's a typical romantic. He probably was one of the romantic, the ultimate romantic poet. You know, the notion that children, as he says in this poem, they're not born innocent. They're born innocent, but they come from heaven trailing clouds of glory, he says. So when you're a young person, you're much more in touch with the natural world, the divine spark, the whatever you want to call it that's out there behind the natural world that inspires everything. And as you grow older, you get more and more corrupt and pass away from that. You get, as he says, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. So I'm going to read you the beginning and the end, because at this point, Wordsworth is himself an old man. And if you're an old man and you've lived with the romantic philosophy that youth is just the best thing, you got problems to deal with. You know, you're going to have to reconcile the fact that you're still alive and still okay with life, even though, all right. So this is the first stanza of this Intimations of Immortality. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. It is not now as it hath been of yore. Turn wheresoe'er I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen I now can see no more. Yeah. And he goes through, you know, the fact that the things of life is making you sort of bad and sad and chipping off all your bright, shiny edges. And at one point near the end of the poem, he says, but I'm going to go out and walk in the springtime and recapture that feeling. And he goes out, and he looks out and he says, well, the grass is green, the flowers are beautiful, the children are out playing, the lambs are bounding about. And then he just breaks your heart. He says, I see, not feel how beautiful they are. You know, his mind they're beautiful, but he says, I just don't feel it anymore. I've lost that edge. And then this is when I say this is the ending that he gives us. What though the radiance which was once so bright be now forever taken from my sight, though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower, we will grieve not, rather find strength in what remains behind, in the primal sympathy which having been must ever be, in the soothing thoughts that spring out of human suffering, in the faith that looks through death, in years that bring the philosophic mind. So that's what we've got, you know? And it's not bad. It's not bad. You have a confidence, you know, that it's still out there even if you can't see it, and you have evolved into having the philosophic mind. So it may not be as good as being, you know, trailing clouds of glory, but here we are. Anyway, there are a lot more poems about old age. If you want to play around with it, it's a great topic. I hope I haven't depressed you with some of these poems, but I mean, I do think that the poets are dealing with the same issues that we are, and they do come out with some interesting observations. So I appreciate your being here. Poetry is the thing.